In a consistent effort to surprise myself, my brain woke me up at 7 a.m. once more to go on for a run in Porto. Whatever they put in the food here is working, because admittedly, I'm quite enjoying my adventures in these morning runs. This day is booked for a big wine tour, so I decided to make my way for a heavy breakfast. We headed to a cafeteria located close to our meeting point with the tour guide and kept a lookout for whenever the other tourists would arrive. Having a complete day planned and packed of activities in a new city is truly a luxury because it lets me ease into the cityscape and the lore of it without the urge to look beyond the curve. It is then that the madness to be on time for some event or one location that keeps pulling the day forward, but rather we enjoy the vacation for what it is. During the bus ride to our first winery, I was able to pick up on this book, How to Think Like a Poet, and it has some really good collections of verses and writers from the past. Totally recommended, including my favorite in this text by Simone Weil. The horses rattled the empty chariots through the files of battle, longing for their noble drivers, but they, on the ground, lay, dearer to the vultures than to their wives. And speaking of battles, our tour guide kept us company throughout the 2 hours of our bus journey by opening up the history of Portugal, how the name comes from the region of Porto and Gaia, how Porto is the fourth largest city in the country with a plague of eucalyptus trees. Very unexpected, since they caused wildfires. It was also interesting to hear that there is a distinct impact of rain on the wine flavor of that year, which reminded me of the olive oil tasting I had earlier in Porto and how the different flavors of olive trees were impacted by the crops that they grew around. For example, a tomato flavored olive oil or variations of its bitterness. Along the road, we also saw yellow flowers on the hills, which are often used as doorstep decorations to ward off the evil spirits, or perhaps just to signify spring season. Since tradition for making wines in this area is centuries old, there are more than 25,000 wineries active today in Porto. Interestingly, vintage Porto wine is seen as a retirement plan for many people. Our guide even rattled off on anecdotes where a bottle of vintage wine could be passed through generations and increase 12% annually by value. In our first winery, we were served a lunch with tomato risotto and fish cakes. Optionally, a meat pasta was also there, along with a tangy white wine and a dry red wine. The people on our table were super friendly and we made conversation rather easily, discussing our favorite wine memories to our opinion of Porto, and of course the excitement for this tour. We were soon ushered along the cellar underground where we saw barrels and barrels of wine covered with cobwebs, which also turned out to be a good thing since they chase away any insects in the storage rooms. We had a wine tasting from 3 bottles, which were essentially different variations of sweet red wine, well, ruby wine, and although I don't want to admit to it, the vintage wine of the 20-year-old bottle really takes the cake. It was so outstanding in its aroma and taste, with the oak scent lingering long after the first few sips were over. We were all in admiration as we walked back to the bus and headed towards the second winery. This one was located on a hill slope, but before we even got there, we had the opportunity for a boat tour. This was an hour-long relaxing tour along the Douro River, and although I did not have wine as part of this complimentary service, it gave me a chance to digest what I already had. We could see many more wineries around the hill slopes during this tour of the river, and the tour guide also commented on some autumn months that were the best to come and see them. There was also a time for the best grape picking season, and he mentioned that those months are usually great for hiring people who even crush the grapes in great barrels with feet. And in those vineyards, it is done so carefully so that the seeds of the grapes are not crushed, and hence the wine is not imparted with any kind of bitterness. Since this type of Porto wine is fortified in the region, it is much like actual champagne from France, and the grape variety and product quality is quite stringently maintained. In the second winery, we got a tour of a rather scenic location and even entered the vineyard to see how the grapes were planted and laid across the farm. A general history of the winery was also told, which is quickly followed by the wine tasting. This particular winery was very enjoyable, with ruby red wines that varied in sweetness from a level of tart to caramel. These are flavors that are quite rare to taste at once, and it reminded me of the phrase acquired taste. Some of these really needed that. Now that the tour was officially over, I was already planning a big dinner in my mind, and we headed to a Brazilian restaurant that was recommended by a friend. And I must admit, the stroganoff was almost the best food to have after all the wines we had since morning. No regrets, of course. I also took this chance to visit the Dom Louis Bridge at night, which is funny since it is the most touristic spot in the city, and I was visiting it just a few hours before I left Porto. But there I caught the perfect moment, a random dance party with people drinking, smoking, just having the time of their life. As I was walking on the bridge, however, the 45-meter high architecture filled me with amazement that it exists in such a grand expanse. The engineering that it must take to build these mega architectures must be so genius to imagine first and then also create. As you can see, the wine was still in my bloodstream, so we had to chill it down nicely with a serving of fresh lemon sorbet and pastel de nata. All in all, my trip to Porto could be summed up as a success. If you come here for a few days or if you come here for a few weeks, you would feel welcome in either case, and you'll feel relaxed all throughout your time here. The warm weather and good vibes definitely change the atmosphere for the better. Who knows, you might even start running.